This is my 24th year of being on the radio. And I used to always say that I married my wife and I dated my stocks. That means that I'm allowed to sell them, buy them back, sell them again. Have no intentions of doing that with my wife in a 33-year marriage. But one of the questions that we get, regardless of where we are and who we meet, is, Joe, Barb, how did you meet? And that's one of the biggest questions I always ask people about their investments and their portfolios, because you get some of the oddest answers. When people come in and they've got their stuff and they sit down and they say, am I ready for retirement? Am I ready for this? What's my family going to get? Is everything going to be okay? I always go, how did you meet that one? Right? Because there's usually something somewhat suspicious inside of a portfolio that got there from one way or the other. How did you meet? Jamie Burton and I are going to break that down on Consider This Program today. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Jamie Burton.
Jamie, how'd we meet?
Purdue. You were my professor at Purdue when I was finishing up my capstone course for my financial planning degree.
And will you always remember that class?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
absolutely.
hope it always serves you value.
Yes.
Right? We had a good time. It's led to your career here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? How'd you meet Chad?
I met him in college. I was good friends with his cousin, so we happened to meet that way.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And there's so many more that I could go through. But you understand where I'm going.
Yeah.
How did you meet? Ladies and gentlemen, you have things that you have traded what I call resources. Time, energy, and money for. You got things inside of your portfolio, things inside of your IRA, things inside of your house where you traded time, money, and energy in order to have them there. And I always ask people how they met. One of the questions I have when somebody calls me up, and it's usually somebody we don't take care of, by the way. I've got a lot of you friends that are out there that still try to do this on your own, and I recognize that may be you. And right now it's just not the right time. You still want to do it on your own, but you've told your spouse, listen, if I can't do it, call the Financial Enhancement Group, find Jamie, find Dean, find somebody, that's on our team and will act as a fiduciary where they have to take care of your money as if it were ours and we were in the same situation. I get all that. So you may be doing stuff on your own today, and that's fine. I want you to take as much from this show as you can, but I would always tell you before you ask about selling a particular stock or a particular investment to sit down and ask yourself how you met. In fact, on the allocation team, we do that essentially every week. How did we meet? What Andrew has to go through in Tactical Edge portfolio, why we bought this and why we sold that. Adam and I do it. It's just part of that process. It's a discipline. Does it take time? Yes. Is it worthwhile? Yes. So that's my side. So part of my life is the managing partner of the Financial Enhancement Group. Part of my life is providing this content and the stuff that we put out. Part of my life is being on the allocation team where I help take care of, at the time of this recording, more than $690 million. And part of it's being on the planning team with Jamie. And so I want her to present her side from the planning team's perspective of how did you meet?
Yeah, so when people come in for a Next Steps meeting and they say, here, this is what I've saved over time that I've been working and it's what I've been able to accumulate, here's what it is, and here are the different things that I'm invested in. A lot of times when you look at it, you're like, how did you end up getting in that? How did you decide to purchase that annuity? Or how did you decide to purchase that whole life insurance policy? And do you really have this much gain inside of a brokerage account that you haven't recognized any over time? And why did those decisions make sense to you? What did you go through to decide that that was the best course of action for you? And really looking at those things can tell us a lot and open up a lot of conversations based on the life experiences that these people have had. And it really tells you a lot about what decisions they're going to be comfortable make going forward.
And it's critical that you understand when you guys walk into the office, Jamie's going to walk you through what we call the fiduciary focus. And on the board, she's going to write out 4 things: risk and volatility, fees and expenses, taxes today, tomorrow, and real return. Then she's going to show you the 3 investments that you can really have: stocks, bonds, and cash. Mm-hmm. and draw a circle around it and tell you that the industry's lazy. Most of the time they use mutual funds. We don't, never have, never will. We use exchange-traded funds. And then she's going to draw a box and say it could be a 401k, an IRA. It may or may not have a Roth option. And then she's going to teach you how to read your tax return. And that's what we do in the first 7 minutes of every first meeting that we have when people come in. Mm-hmm. And it's critical that you understand those components, because there's possibility that that you've got a bad relationship you don't think you can get out of. And sometimes you're right. We'll have people who come in who have $1 million in a stock or in a mutual fund that they've put money into years over years over years over years, that may have a consequence of $200,000 or $300,000 of long-term capital gains. Mm-hmm. And that's when you have to figure out how to depart that relationship slowly and gradually. Mm-hmm. Unlike my wife, right? You don't just slowly walk out of marriage, right? It's like, Barb, we're getting divorced 10 years from now. I'm going to take a 10th off the table each year, right? I don't think that's going to work well with her.
No, I doubt it.
But with a stock, you can do it. They have no emotion, mm-hmm. right? You can say, all right, I'm going to be disciplined enough. I know I've got to get out of this relationship, mm-hmm. and I'm going to take 10% off the table each and every year for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. But you need to go through this scenario of why you got there. And folks, if you're doing it on your own and you're going to turn it over, and most of the time your spouse is unaware of, by the way, their new job assignment. But if you're going to turn it over to your spouse, you need to sit down and have conversations with them about how we got here too, mm-hmm. right? Why we're here. I remember a husband and wife, second marriage, didn't talk about money. Jamie's got her money, Joe's got his money, right? They didn't talk.
Yep.
And it was about $500,000 in both accounts. I think they both knew that.
Okay.
Right? And you walk in and you've got $500,000 in the S&P 500 fund in your 401k, mm-hmm. because somebody told you that index funds were cheaper. You didn't have as much expense, mm-hmm. right? And, the market was doing its thing, and nobody can time the market. And you bought all of these things that edified your own thought. And then the other party walked in, and they had an actively traded manager, if you will. So they're trying to figure out the market and make decisions. And they had $200,000 that was an inverse ETF of the S&P 500. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what just happened in that relationship is Wall Street made money off of $200,000 in the S&P 500 fund and $200,000 in the inverse ETF, right? Because the commission guy that was selling that inverse fund got paid, the custodian got paid, and the fund holder that created the inverse fund got paid. You got nothing. You got squat, right? And that's the danger to a degree of having too many chefs in the kitchen. That's mm-hmm. one. But two, it really is understanding how you met. You can't just let people buy things inside of your portfolio without them being able to explain, okay, here's why you own it. Mm-hmm. And it's why we do the Market Carver every single week, where we send out a video. Either Adam Harder, our chief investment officer, and one of my partners, he's a CFA, either he or myself do the Market Carver every single week, where we send out a 7 to 9 minute video. It says, hey, here's what's going on. Here's why we think it matters. And, you need to be aware of what it is you own and how you met.
Mm-hmm. And it can get so dangerous when you are making these decisions on your own, knowing that there are changes that are being made in the industry all the time, whether it be financial planning or legislative changes in the tax code. There's always changes that are being made. So if you're making these investment decisions based on your life experiences and you aren't able to keep up on these changes, there's a pretty good chance that the decisions that you're making are really going to be detrimental to your future and to what your portfolio is going to look like and be able to do for you going forward. So I know back a while ago, CDs used to be a great investment to put your money into. They would lock up your money for a short amount of time, but you would get this great return out of it. Bonds used to be a great place to put your money if you wanted a safe place to have this money sit and get a good return on that investment. But that stuff has changed over time. And if you haven't changed your investments and your financial plan with those changes, then things aren't going to be looking good for you going forward, and you really need to sit down and analyze what that looks like for you.
And don't just take things at first glance, right? So let's go back to something you said, because you almost said back in the day. You're too young for that. So do you think CDs were really that good of an investment?
I mean, they weren't a great investment, but they were a good place to put some of your more conservative assets.
So I always will start. I'm a checklist freak, and yes, I created the fiduciary focus, but that doesn't mean I don't use the fiduciary focus. So every time I have to make a financial decision for me or anyone else, I will write at the top of the paper, risk and volatility, fees and expenses, taxes today and tomorrow, and real return. Right. So when CDs were at their heyday, peak of inflation was 1980, right? The average 30-year mortgage was at 18%. CD rates were at 14, some higher in bad institutions were at 14. And the inflation rate, without the tax rate, actually made them negative. So you can say this was a safe and place to put, and we'll have CFAs that we know and love dearly who would say this is a safe, right, because you have no principal volatility. But just remember, as you go through your CFP studies, there are 11, depending on who you talk to, there are 11 to 13 different risks to money. Principal is merely one of them. The erosion of purchasing power is one of my biggest concerns for our retirement generation going forward, because they're buying annuities and they're making financial decisions based on the premonition that there is no inflation out there, or that it will go away. The Fed called it transitory, right? No, folks, inflation is here, and it's here for a lot of reasons. And you need to know when you met those investments, if they made sense then or if they make sense now, right? In your relationships, not your wife or your husband, in your relationships or your kids or your dog, right? Cats are out. No, seriously, you need to make the decisions. Is it right for you today based on where you are? And that's true of your 401k. It's true of IRAs. It's true of financial relationships. It's true of investments inside of the financial accounts. And I think so many times we ignore that. We just get caught being complacent, flat-footed. It's been that way, ain't changing. Right? Sometimes you need to change.
Yes. And those are conversations that we can have for you. You go ahead and give us a call at 800-928-4001. You can call and talk to Brittany, set up your next steps meeting. In that 90-minute meeting, we're going to talk to you about things that you need to consider today, things to consider tomorrow, and if we choose to partner together, things that FEG will do for you going forward. And you can find us at yourlifeafterwork.com.